everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Bit of a different story we're going to talk about today because we are related to the mining industry, but we come at it from an environmental perspective. Effectively, we're going to talk about bugs eating rocks, and the bugs are replacing conventional mining and smelting, which has obviously been very toxic to the environment over the years. And without further ado, I'm sure you'll spend a lot of time reading this, and that's enough. Good, okay. I'm going to circle back to this, but this is what's been going on in Canada just in the last month or so. The government's stepping up big time, obviously, to source battery metals, which of course we produce a lot of in Canada. Metals that we didn't know were battery metals at one time, but are now so. So the issues that we're facing all the time, of course, is the growing demand for resources that exists in the marketplace, and I guess the perceived lack of supply that's going to lead to imbalances in the supply chain. Other issues in mining, of course, are the toxic environments that are created by artisanal miners, people who are literally scratching out a living on a day-to-day basis, but causing a heck of a mess in their wake. As I'll get to later on, like in the case of rare earths, we've been doing that for years. We just didn't have enough of them to make any money at it. And you'll see that bioleaching really has, using nature to conduct our work, has made, really opened up a Pandora's box of opportunities for our little company. So, yeah. The main culprit in pollution in mining are the sulfides. And the sulfides tend to contain all the value. In the old days, they burned them. It created sulfur dioxide, arsenic trioxide, anything that was contained along with the metals that you were after. Sphalerite, molybdenite, chalk, these are all sulfide minerals that contain various metals of different sizes and grades. And it's the cause of a lot of problems. Of course, there's the tailings that are left over. When sulfides end up in tailings, they oxidize on their own, they create sulfuric acid, they take anything with it into the rivers, like heavy metals, arsenic, lead, things like that. Obviously, burning it, as I said before, you create toxic gases. And of course, the reclamation for a lot of these tailings can be very expensive, especially in the cases where you have bursted dams and the environmental damage that's created by tailings, plowing down into a river are horrible to the environment and to animals, et cetera. So what's the solution? Well, the solution from our point of view is using bacteria that exist in nature to do in 6 days what would normally take them 20 years to do in nature. And effectively, if you can imagine a brick wall, the bacteria are going after the mortar. And eventually, when the mortar's gone, everything comes crashing down. So in these large tanks, stainless tanks, we have a 6-day process that starts on a continual basis. The bacteria start working on the sulfides that eventually releases all the other elements that are attached to it, like iron, arsenic, gold, silver, copper, etc. And at the end of the process, at the end of the 6 days, anything that's soluble in acid, because the pH in the tanks is very acidic, will dissolve. All the base metals, arsenic, etc. And anything that does not dissolve in acid, like gold, silver, and PGMs, they go in separate directions for recovery. So you've now oxidized your gold, you've released it for recovery, so you can make a doré, and then you use limestone on the other side to start raising the pH. This goes back to grade 12 chemistry. And what happens is the iron and the arsenic band together and precipitate out as a ferric arsenate, which is an EPA landfillable material. We'll dry stack it, of course, and cover it over time. So that's how the technology works in a nutshell. And it's a continuous process. So you're taking something that literally a miner can't sell and you're actually turning it into a profit for him, and you're doing it in a responsible fashion. The technology is commercially proven. We've built 3 plants for other people. There's 2 in Australia and 1 in China. It's obviously environmentally friendly. We just discovered that we were an ESG company about 6 months ago because somebody told us. We've been doing this for 10 years, and 3 years ago we were a CSR company. So I don't know what we'll be in 3 years forward, but effectively the environmental side of what we do is evident. The social side for what we're doing in Ecuador, which is where our plant is being built, is also evident. And the governance side is really constituting our board to be more in tune with what's going on in the world today. It's a big market. We're the only nuts out there that go chasing after arsenic. I say that to people all the time because anybody in the mining business who puts a drill hole and hits arsenopyrite, that's the end of the drill program, because they know they're going to the problems they're going to have down the road getting rid of this material and processing it. So it is a bit of a niche opportunity for us. There's only 2 companies in the world that do it. Goldfields out of South Africa has probably built 20 bio-leach plants, and BacTech, which has built 3. We've gone one step further along the way and also done a pilot plant with Peñoles on copper as well. So that's going to lead us into Peru down the road once we're finished with Ecuador. I'll touch on the R&D side shortly because that's really the exciting future for what the company's all about. So the commercial side is the gold and silver production. There's an area in Ecuador called Ponce Enriquez that exclusively produces arsenopyrite concentrates. It's a perfect storm for us, actually, and I'll get to that shortly. I want to also talk about the R&D side for copper, nickel, and cobalt. Again, the battery metals side of things. Something that we did 20 years ago, but we were way ahead of the curve. So we've now just filed a patent on this process for recovering nickel out of the Sudbury Basin that's well over $15 billion worth of nickel sitting in pyrrhotite tailings. And then there's the rare earths. As I said before, rare earths are not rare. They're everywhere. But it's the concentrations you need to make money are not there. So that's why you have only specific areas where you can actually mine this sort of thing. So Ecuador. So I was approached by a young guy named Bernardo Brito, who was a metal trader. And he said, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And I said, sure. So we got onto Skype back then. And he said, I'm in the metal trading business down here, and my job is to find copper concentrates, but I'm competing with all the big guys. And I keep seeing these mining sacks leaving every day from Ponce Enriquez and heading for the coast. So I finally inquired what it was, and they said, well, it's arsenopyrite, arsenic gold concentrates that are produced in the area. Well, where are they going? Well, they're going to China. Oh. Well, how much do the Chinese pay for that? He said probably 65 to 70 cents of the gold value, percent of the gold value. So a nice profit for them. So he phoned me and he said, I went online and I found some research that bioleaching is very effective at stabilizing arsenic. Is that true? And I said, yes, it is. So he sort of walked me through the process, and I got very, very interested, obviously, because there's 90 mines in this area that collectively produce about 250 tons of concentrate a day. Now, what happened was in October of last year, the Chinese government changed the game plan. They slapped an import tax of 13% on high arsenic gold concentrates coming into the country because there was too much arsenic going into the country. And they did this in the copper market probably 5-6 years ago as well. The difference is you can blend copper concentrates to lower the arsenic grade to avoid the tax. If you've got a clean gold concentrate, you're not going to blend it and send it to China. It's just not going to happen. So we spent about 6 months doing bioleach test work in Perth, Australia, where our Dr. Paul Miller lives, and effectively came up with about 96% gold recoveries and 100% arsenic stabilization. Okay, that's the first tick, the first tick of the box. The second question is, can you make money at it? So we hired an independent group called EPCMC out of Bolivia, actually. It's an engineering company, who did a feasibility study for us and came up with a CapEx of $17 million, annual production of just under 31,000 ounces of gold, about 45,000 ounces of silver. and an operating cost of only $212 a ton. So our plan is to go back to the prices that were paid by the Chinese previous to the import tax. Right now, the miners are getting less than 50 cents on the dollar for their, they're not even making any money. It's crazy. I go there and I feel like the Pied Piper because everybody's chasing me around town trying to sign up to be, to get into our plant. We're only building, to start off, a 50-ton-a-day plant, which means we're probably going to be dealing with the top 5 guys in the area at 10 tons a day each. We want to expand very quickly to 250 tons a day because there's a lot of tailings in the area that contain a lot of arsenopyrite as well. And all that stuff eventually makes its way into the river and goes to Peru, and Peru's not very happy about it. So we've done the bioleach test work. We've completed the bankable feasibility study. The numbers were crazy. I mean, at today's prices, the cash flow on that $17 million CapEx is about $13 million a year. So our payback on this plant is going to be very, very quick. We're in discussions with a number of different groups on financing the debt side, which would be about 70% of that amount, or call it 15 million by the time we're done with inflation and everything else, because that's real. We were already given the construction permit, which is bizarre because we haven't even got the environmental permit yet. But the government of Ecuador needs money. They're broke like most countries in South America, and they know the only way out of that problem is to develop their natural resources, but they have to do it in such a fashion that it shows the people that they're taking the environment and their livelihoods into consideration. So we become a bit of a poster boy for the Ministry of Mines down there because of the fact we're an ESG company that's going to be reducing the discharge of arsenic and mercury and cyanide into the local environment. By the way, we won't buy concentrates that have already been pre-treated by the miners with mercury and cyanide. That's the easiest way to get them off that habit. We just say we're not going to buy it. So he's got no choice but to not do it. So we hope to start to build by the fourth quarter of this year. Construction is going to be somewhere 4 to 5 months. These are large stainless tanks that are built on site. We have an interesting situation with on the S side of ESG. We're going to be paying roughly $12,000 US a year to the workers, which is a pretty good wage for that area. Ecuadorian law calls for 15% employee participation, so we fully expect to be cutting checks to these people for $40,000 to $50,000 a year as a bonus on top of their $12,000, which sounds like a great thing, but I say to people, when was the last time you heard a good lottery story? It's incumbent on us to make sure that we give some financial guidance to these people as to what you do when you have windfalls such as that. Do you want your kids to go to school? Do you want to own a house, et cetera? So, money is not the answer to all problems, that's for sure, but if it's done properly, it makes life a lot easier. So that's Ecuador. Oh, why Ecuador? Getting ahead of myself. That's actually an aerial picture of the property that we bought. It's about 100 acres. It's actually another one of the S on the ESG is it's covered in cocoa trees. It's a producing cocoa farm. And I could see it in the eyes of the guys who were working there when we drove onto the property the first time. They went, oh boy, we're out of work. But my problem is I'm not in the cocoa business, and I don't need 100 acres of dead cocoa trees. So we're working on a deal with them where they're going to basically keep what they harvest as long as they keep the plants alive and take over the production and sale of that product for their own account. So we do have the support of the government, as I said before. I had lunch with the Minister of Mines when I was there the last time. Went for 2 hours, and it was a very laid-back, casual. I said to him, we don't do this in Canada. I mean, I'd have to make a contribution to the Liberal Party, which I wouldn't do, but now the other thing is that this will all be powered by hydropower, again, which just adds to the green aspect of what it is we're doing. Just last week, we signed what's called an investment protection agreement with the government. That's the young gentleman on the right is Bernardo Brito, who brought the project to us. He's now our country manager. In essence, what this said was, if you have a dispute with the government over anything, whether it's environmental or financial, it will be mediated at an international court in London, England, which means you're not fighting battles in the backyard of the home team. But more importantly, because we're introducing a biotechnology to the country, we have a 12-year tax holiday. And the number of 95 million that popped out in the press release that we put out is effectively the cumulative investment we'll make to get to that 250 tons a day. And that attracts the interests of, I guess you'd call them world bodies that finance these sorts of projects. There's just some economic sensitivities. It shows you where we are. So at just under $1,900 gold, your EBITDA is almost $14 million. I get a lot of people saying, "No, you got the decimal in the wrong place." And I said, no, that's actually what the numbers are. We know what it costs per ton to process the material. Obviously, the higher grade material, the better, because it all falls to the bottom line. It's the same operating cost. When we expand into the bigger plant, the grades will go down, but then you do it with volume. We anticipate producing somewhere between 100 and 125,000 ounces a year at roughly 30% margins. Nice business. That's our timeline. You can see construction starting later this year, but production definitely in the first half of next year. Now, that's pyrrhotite. So a billion years ago, a meteor hit Sudbury, Ontario. Actually, Sudbury wasn't there, but it is now. And that led to the deposit of very high-grade nickel, cobalt, copper. And for 100 years, they've been mining nickel in the Sudbury Basin. And that created the companies Inco, International Nickel Company, and Falconbridge, which are now owned by Glencore and by Vale. Pyrrhotite is one of the sulfide minerals. It's full of iron. And 22 years ago, we did a test program for a year in Australia at a place called Radio Hill, and we easily bioleached the nickel and the cobalt. But we created a second problem: was what do we do with all this iron? And you can't just dump iron in a hole in the ground. So it was abandoned. A lot happened in the last 22 years. Mostly the price of nickel has gone crazy, and getting metals out of solution is a lot cheaper than it used to be. And so we went back and looked at it again. And we filed a patent recently on a process patent that effectively will use the iron in a reconstituted form into the production of carbon steel. 180 kilometers, sorry, I'm in the States, 130 miles due west of Sudbury is Sault Ste. Marie on a rail line, and that's where Algoma Steel is. And Algoma is a big pipe manufacturer in carbon steel. So taking this whole messy pyrrhotite, we're going to turn it into elemental sulfur, which has got a market value of $90 a ton. We're going to turn it into a form of iron to be used in steel production, which runs today about $130 a ton. Nickel prices now are $13.50 a pound. When we did the study, they were probably $2 years ago. And we're going to produce this nickel cobalt concentrate. Now, as a lark today, I mean, this is kind of an aside, we sent an email to Elon Musk and said, "You want nickel? We got nickel." Because there's it's probably $20 billion worth of nickel sitting in those tailings. Now, the funny thing about pyrrhotite is it's a very, very difficult sulfide, because if it's left on its own in the open, it'll burst into flames. It actually is, it's rock that will catch on fire. And so right now it's all buried they used up lakes. They took small lakes and they just put it in and covered it with water. And there's 100 million tons of this stuff sitting there. So pentlandite is the sulfide they wanted to produce the nickel from. This stuff was a pain in the neck, and they just threw it off to the side. 100 million tons worth, though. So the test work that we did do back 22 years ago got 98% nickel recovery. cobalt 98%, and iron 99%. So we're effectively taking an orange and peeling it off, but using the rinds and using everything, using the seeds and everything, and selling them off in individual pieces. It's going to be very exciting, and to be honest, when we made the press release, people kind of yawned. I don't think they really understand what it is we're trying to do. But we'll be working in the Sudbury area in a pilot plant and working on this technology. And effectively, like I said, we've already done the bio-leach side. We know that's going to work. We actually jokingly were doing these numbers before, and we're wrong. It's more like $26 billion worth of nickel, but if it was 14, I'm happy with that. And then finally, rare earths. As I said, they're really not that rare. They're in most rock. They just don't show up in abundance. But there are certain areas like Mountain Pass has an operation in the Mojave Desert. It's the only producer in the Western Hemisphere, I believe. And of course, it's dominated by Chinese. Why we got onto this was about last July, the Pentagon reached out for requests for proposals for bioleaching rare earths. We didn't get it because we're Canadian. It most likely went to academia, which means it's going to take way too long. This is something that we can do within a year. We just need to find the right source of material to do our test work on, and that's what we're trying to do right now. What we're doing here is we're just replacing one step of the current process that is very toxic. So we're sort of taking out that middle section where they use a lot of chemicals and acids to release the rare earths, and we're going to put bioleaching in there. And those would be licensing deals. I mean, obviously somebody's not going to say, you know, we're going to buy a plant from you. We want to change what we do and do it cleaner, and we'd be happy to pay you a royalty or whatever it is. I mean, that remains to be seen. So why would you invest in us now? Well, again, we're only one of two companies in the world that actually has commercialized bioleaching. Mining hates new technology. This isn't even new. This has been around since the 80s. But that is a short period of time in mining. And they'll always tell you, look, go off and have Harry do it first, and then come back when if it works, then we'll be your second plant. So being commercial is a huge leg up on any other of the newer technologies that are being developed that are probably 10 years away. Again, we focus on arsenic, which most people run away from. So the cost of acquisition of what we're looking for is obviously cheaper than it would be for, say, conventional concentrates. And of course, it's an environmentally process. Our margins are around 30%. Our CapEx is relatively low when you consider what it costs to build a mine. We have no underground operations to deal with. We don't even drill holes in the ground. It's all sitting there in the parking lot in the back of the truck of the guy who's just been mining it for the last week or so and has come to sell his product. You know, we're looking at revenues in around $60 million a year at this stage. Those numbers, of course, will go up to probably 200 million with the expansion, and 30% of 200 million is a lot of money. And we do have that tax holiday. So as far as milestones, the next one will be, we're in the middle of our detailed engineering, you know, where all the nuts and bolts have to go. We'll start to order our longer lead time stuff like stainless steel and impellers that we need for the inside of the tanks. But you know, it's an above ground construction project when it happens, and it can be done relatively quickly. Sustainability, I guess, you know, that's the buzzword now in mining, in everything really. As I said, we've been doing it for 10 years. We just didn't know what it was called. It was just made sense to us, that's all. The project life cycle, again, an average bio-leach plant will last you 20 years, and it's only because the stainless steel has finally succumbed to the acid exposure that's been had for 20 years. If we use carbon steel, we'd get 3 years out of those tanks, and that would be it. So stainless, fortunately, is a great medium to host a very, very acidic environment. 163 million outstanding. Market cap's about 16 million, 17 million Canadian, which is, when you think about our anticipated cash flow for the first year, it's kind of crazy, actually. Fully diluted, about 200 million. We just successfully raised money at 20 cents a share. even though our stock price is down at 10 to 12 cents. What we did was we created a stock unit and we threw in a royalty. So an individual who normally would never own a royalty on a mining project now could actually get a piece of the pie without having to just buy one of the royalty companies. He actually is going to get a check from us, on a semi-annual basis until he's recovered 200% of his investment after tax. So you get the stock for free at the end of the day, and we use a Canadian tax of 25%, which means your payback's about 3 years. 5. So that was very unique. We actually raised 2.1 million on the back of that. And then we recently did a convertible debenture with a shareholder as well for $1 million. We've got to spend about $6 million US as our contribution to meet the 30% equity for the project, and I'm highly confident we'll do it. Some interesting people here. The fellow on the top right, everybody remember Bre-X, that disaster from the 90s? Jay was the head prosecutor for the Ontario Securities Commission, and I'm happy to say a friend of mine, so keeps us out of trouble. But it speaks volumes for the quality of people that we have on our board. A lot of gray hair here. Walter Samowski, the third from the left, is actually a partner in Ocean Partners who trade concentrates on a global basis. And David Tingy on the bottom row, on the second from the left, is our recently hired Chief Operating Officer. I don't build plants. I wouldn't even know where to start. But I'm sort of the financial side and the public face of the company. But that fellow and Dr. Paul Miller, who's the second on the right, are the guys who stir the drink. Paul is a brilliant metallurgist / engineer, and arguably the best guy at bioleaching in the world. And because we live in a world of Zoom and everything, he lives quite happily in Perth, Australia, and we talk 3 times a week, and it's a great group of people. And that is it. Questions? Oh, I just wanted to say thank you to Chris Temple. Is he here? Oh, there he is back there. Chris and I met a number of years ago over Ecuador, our common desire to do business in Ecuador. And he's been a great help. And, a lot of people here I've met, I didn't realize that actually when I spoke here 3 or 4 years ago, were smart enough to buy the stock when it was 2 cents or 1 cent or whatever it was, and apparently still own it today. So I appreciate your constant updates on our progress, and look forward to giving you more material to spread as well. So thanks. Okay.